Hello all, welcome back to Kalam Academy. This is Priyanka Mahapatra, faculty at Kalam. So today we will be having a discussion on the simultaneous polls. So firstly, why did we pick up this topic? Because recently in news, an 8-member committee under the leadership of former President Sri Ramnath Kovind has been constituted to look into to understand the feasibility of simultaneous election in India. Okay, the report has been forwarded now and soon it will be public. Again, when we see the relevance, it is very much relevant to the GS paper 2 of our UPSC syllabus. If we understand the linkage of static syllabus, then we can link it to the constitutional amendment procedure. We can link it to the constitutional provisions of elections. One needs to understand the concept of federalism, no confidence motion with respect to this topic, right? Then when we see a PYQ, there is a PYQ asked in 2017 about the simultaneous election when it was also in news that time very much. Okay, so it goes like this. Simultaneous election to the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies will limit the amount of time and spent in electioneering. Okay, this is the positive aspect of the question, like how, why, and how it is desirable. Okay, then also asking about the negative aspect of this very concept, simultaneous polls, that is, it will reduce the government's accountability to the people. So we will be discussing everything about this topic in the coming slides. So what we would be discussing? So we would be discussing basically about why it is desirable, what is the government's standpoint, okay, and what are the issues concerned with this very concept, and what is the way forward, right? So let's get started. So these are the sources of this very discussion. I have taken the content of this discussion from Indian Express, from the Hindu, the Times of India, and many more articles. Okay. So why was it in the news? Okay, so we just discussed that a 8-member committee has been constituted under the leadership of former President Ramnath Kovind to examine, to understand the feasibility of simultaneous polls in context of India. Also, the Law Commission is also working on a formula like how to synchronize all the assembly polls of Lok Sabha, of the state assemblies, of the local polls, okay, by extending or reducing the tenure so that these elections can be held at one time. Okay, from 2029 onwards. Okay, and also we can see in the news that how the opposition parties have shown their disagreement by saying that it is undemocratic, it is a conspiracy against the southern states. So we will look into all these aspects of this very topic. So before moving further with the topic discussion, we need to understand the election process in India. Okay, so the election process has been very staggered presently. Okay, staggered in the sense that elections happen in some other part of the year at various levels. We can say that India is always in the election mode. Okay, and moreover, India is having a very huge electorate of 800 million people. So we can say that there is a considerable monetary and logistical efforts involved in the process. Moreover, the model code of conduct also is a dampener. It remains in place right from the moment the dates are decided to the day of completion of all the process. And during this process, no government can take measures with respect to any new policy making, any inauguration of new projects, nothing can happen. And it also remains in force for a good stretch of time, that is 2 to 3 months. So this becomes a dampener to the developmental process of India. So for that reason, we are thinking for bringing simultaneous elections in India. Understood? So we'll be discussing more on this aspect of this topic. Firstly, we need to understand the constitutional amendment that is linked to the static part of the syllabus. Okay, because there will be a lot of constitutional amendments involved if the simultaneous elections come into picture in India. Okay, so what do you mean by that? What is that actually? It is the process of making changes to the fundamental law of the land, that is the Constitution of India. Okay, and it has been designed in such a way so that the sanctity of the Constitution is always ensured and it keeps a check on the arbitrary power of the legislature of India, that is the Parliament of India. So, how it has been done? So we can bring the constitutional amendment by two ways. Okay, that is, first is the simple majority of the parliament. We can bring changes to the constitution by a simple majority of the parliament with respect to the following provisions. The provisions are the Article 2, 5th schedule, citizenship, and the elections to the parliament and state legislatures. Okay, then comes the second way, that is Article 368. It has also got two types of amendment under it: by the simple majority of the parliament, and again simple majority of the parliament with the ratification of the half of the total states. Okay. Let's now see what are the provisions that require the special majority of the parliament and the consent of the states as well. Okay, so what do you think that requires the consent of the states? Obviously, that is linked to the federal structure and any major constitutional change. Okay, for example, election to the president, then extent of the executive power of the union and the states, Supreme Court, High Court, then distribution of the legislative powers between the state and the union, and any changes made to the list of the seventh schedule. Okay, representation of the state in the parliament. So everything is linked to the federal structure, to the states. Power of the parliament to the to amend the constitution and its procedure. Okay, so these are the various provisions which require both the things, that is a special majority and the consent of the states. And always remember from the prelims point of view that there is no time limit within which the states can give their assent to the particular bill with respect to these provisions. Okay? Okay. Let's now understand the topic of the day, that is the simultaneous polls. So what do you mean by that? So as the name suggests, it is the concept of synchronizing the timing of the Lok Sabha elections, the state assembly elections, the local body elections across all the states of India, only for a purpose to reduce the frequency of polls throughout the country, which we already discussed. I told you that the election process has been very staggered. We have a staggered electoral cycle, particularly in cases where there are more than 5 state elections occurring annually. Okay, so to address this very problem, we have come up with the simultaneous polls. So simultaneous polls में ये होता है कि we get together, we bring together all the elections at one time, such that the voters in a particular constituency vote on the same day. ठीक है, but you should also understand that it doesn't mean that the voting across the country for all elections need to happen on a single day. ये single day में होना जरूरी नहीं है, but in a particular constituency all the people would come, all the voters would come and vote on the same day for all the elections, for the local body, for the state, and for the Lok Sabha elections. Understood? Then it is conducted in a phase-wise manner, not on a single day, as I already told you. ठीक है? So this is all about the simultaneous polls. So let's now understand the timeline of simultaneous polls. Okay, the background of simultaneous polls. So here you need to understand that the simultaneous polls is not at all new to India. Okay, so this had happened in fact in the first ever general elections to Lok Sabha and the state assemblies in the year 1951 to 1952. Okay, there was simultaneous elections then. That practice continued into 3 subsequent elections, Lok Sabha elections, because there was the dominance of one party, that is Congress party, and the regional parties had no say. Okay, this happened until 1967, when the regional parties came into picture, the regional politics came into picture. So after that, there were defections, counter defections between parties, and several legislative assemblies they got dissolved post 1960. Okay, and this eventually led to the separate polls for Lok Sabha and the state assemblies. Okay, so if this is a prelims question again, the cycle was first broken in 1959 after the center invoked Article 356, that is failure of constitutional machinery, to dismiss the then Kerala government. So this very point you need to remember for prelims. In fact, all the points are important for prelims. Okay, then in 1983, the Election Commission of India suggested the working on simultaneous elections because there was problems happening due to the staggered election process. Okay, and currently when you see in a year like with the Lok Sabha election, we have also the assembly polls of some states. Okay, partially we have the simultaneous polls happening today also, but in a partial way. When the Lok Sabha elections coincides with the election polls of some states, like it happened with the states of Arunachal Pradesh, with Sikkim, Andhra Pradesh, and Odisha. ठीक है. When we talk of international level also, the concept is not new. It is present very much in South Africa, Belgium, Germany, Sweden, in UK. In fact, the term of parliament in the UK is regulated by the Fixed Term Parliament Act of 2011. ठीक है. So this is all about the timeline of the simultaneous polls. So let's now understand the advantages of the simultaneous polls. So actually, when you pick up a topic, we need to understand the advantages, why it is desirable and why it is not desirable. That is the disadvantages. Okay, so let's now understand the pros of this topic. So first point is that it cuts the cost of repeated elections to the tune of 3,000 to 4,000 crores. Okay, in 2019, the expenditure was in the tune of 60,000 crores. It was huge. Okay, and this expenditure is of both the Election Commission of India and the political parties. Okay, and above all, when there are 2 to 5 state assemblies going for polls every 6-month period, just think about the expenditure happening in a year with respect to the elections. So when there will be a simultaneous poll, when there will be election happening only once in 5 years, then there will be lot cut in the costs. Okay, so that is how we can optimize the cost. Second point is that the simultaneous polls will optimize the governance and the development. How is it happening? Okay, because this model code of conduct will not come into picture due to the repetitive polls. Once the election happens in every 5 years, then the model code of conduct only will come into picture once in 5 years. So there will be avoidance of policy paralysis. Okay. And also the parties in power will not tend to take any populist measures. Otherwise, when there were frequent polls, the parties in power, they were taking populist measures for immediate political gains rather than thinking of long-term prudent policy making. Okay. So this can be also avoided with the simultaneous polls happening. Third point is less polarization. The polarization will be less in case of simultaneous polls. So when the elections will happen in 5 years, then there will be less caste involved, less communal issues involved, less crony capitalism involved. Because frequent polls, they perpetuate the casteism, the communal issues, the crony capitalism, and so on and so forth. Okay? Then comes the next advantage, that is the simultaneous polls reduces the strain on the administrative setup and the security forces. So how does it reduce the strain on the administrative setup and the security forces? Because the administrative setup and the security forces were diverted from their normal duties. The security forces like CAPF, the paramilitary forces, the state police forces, they were diverted from the sensitive border areas, from the sensitive crime zones to the election duty. Okay, but with the simultaneous polls, this can be minimized. Okay, then we come to the next point, that frequent elections are a threat to the safety and security. Obviously, when the security forces, they are diverted from the sensitive border areas or the sensitive crime zones, there is a threat to the security and the safety of India. Okay, so but with the simultaneous polls, this can be minimized. Again, it is said that the simultaneous polls will increase the voter turnout because it will be convenient for people to come to their hometown on one day and just cast their ballots and it's done. Otherwise, what was happening, there were frequent elections at various levels and people were not coming to the hometown to cast their ballots so frequently. It was kind of a burden for them. Okay, so that's how it can increase the voter turnout. Then for that reason, many committees, many working paper like Law Commission, Parliamentary Standing Committee, Jeevan Reddy Committee, they have all advocated, they have all shown their desire for the simultaneous elections or the one nation, one election. Okay. But now the main question comes that desire करने से कुछ नहीं होगा, one has to see the feasibility of the process as well. So the real problem lies in the feasibility, not the desirability. Okay. Again, a question is there that can simultaneous elections for both the central and the state legislatures be implemented given the federal nature of Indian democracy guaranteed by the constitution? ठीक है, so we will look into these aspects. So let's now understand the constraints, the cons, the disadvantages of the simultaneous polls. So the Law Commission of India's draft report said, that is chaired by Justice B.S. Chauhan, said that it is not feasible within the existing framework of the Constitution. So why it has said so? We will look out for the reasons one by one. So the first reason goes, that is the constitutional and the statutory concerns we will be having. So how is it? We will be having to make amendments to not less than 5 articles of the Constitution in order to implement the simultaneous polls in India. For example, Articles 83 and 172 tells that we can dissolve the state assemblies before the actual completion of the tenure of the legislature. ठीक है, but in the case of simultaneous polls we need a fixed tenure. Okay, so see the contradiction. When the articles, the present articles 83 and 172 is allowing the early dissolve of the legislature, but the simultaneous elections need a fixed tenure for its implementation. Okay, so we need to change the constitutional provisions over here. Then we also need to change the Representation of Peoples Act 1951 and the rules of procedure of Lok Sabha and the state assemblies as well. Okay, so and above all, we need also the ratification of at least 50% of the states for the amendment process. Okay, so see how cumbersome it is and how it is a stumbling block for its rollout. Okay, so let's now understand the very important constraint or the disadvantage of the simultaneous polls, that it infringes on the federal structure of the constitution. Okay, so you must understand this very topic because this very point can become itself a question for the UPSC. Okay, so let's understand this. So it infringes on the federal structure of the constitution. Why it is said so? Because it can change the system into a unitary structure. How? Because the ruling party can become autocratic here without any checks and balances. How? The ruling government in a state, they can recommend the dissolution of the assembly. ठीक है, आराम से they can do that because that is their own assembly and they can recommend the voluntary dissolution of the assembly. And where the opposition parties are ruling, they can bring president's rule through the recommendation of the central government. ठीक है, so that's how it is a blow to the federalism over here, to the democracy over here. So imagine the situation, there are many questions arising. Imagine a situation where a state government is falling in a year for whatsoever reasons. But here one cannot keep the state under president's rule for the rest of the 4 years and wait for the synchronization of the polls, of the simultaneous polls. Similarly, if the Lok Sabha falls within some days, like the Bajpayee government fell in 13 days, so you cannot keep the Lok Sabha going. Again, it raises a question there that you cannot dissolve the government in all the 29 states where there is absolute majority of the ruling government. So understanding how questions are raised, how important constitutional concerns are raised in this very procedure. Okay, so that's how you will be writing how it is infringing upon the federal structure of the constitution. So let's now talk about the next very important disadvantage of the simultaneous polls, that is it infringes on the democracy. So here you can talk about how the rights are getting jeopardized in the process. Okay, so imagine a situation where parliament or assemblies are prematurely dissolved before completing their terms of 5 years to hold the simultaneous elections after the fixed tenure. Okay, here the choice of the voter is getting affected, number one. His freedom of speech and expression is getting affected. There is a breakdown of the sacrament that existed between the people and the legislature, that is the parliament. So this is how it is a blow to the democracy of India if we are conducting the simultaneous polls, right? So next point is that the accountability is diminished in the process. How? The frequent elections, through the frequent elections, the legislators are on their toes always, because again and again the legislators will come in front of the electorate and their views are registered, the discontentment is registered. Okay, but when the elections are happening once in 5 years, this accountability is minimized. this registering of views is minimized. Okay, so this is how the accountability is diminished. Again, when we see the present system where the national issues and local issues, they are separated off. But when we will conduct the simultaneous polls, the local issues and the national issues will be blended. They will be one. Even, in fact, the national issues will eclipse the local ones. So this is how there will be diminishing of accountability there also. When there is avoidance of blending of issues, national issues and the local issues, there is greater accountability. That is happening now in the present mode of election. Okay. So in the process, when the simultaneous polls will be happening, there is an advantage of national parties over the regional parties, and the national issues might eclipse the local ones. The people will more think about the issue of terrorism, the issue of national security, who will be the next prime minister. So those issues will be eclipsing the local problems. Again, it is seen that there is a tendency among the voters to vote for the same party, both for electing the state government as well as the central government. It is seen in different countries like South Africa, Belgium. In the surveys, it is seen it's a tendency among the voters to vote for the similar party. Okay? So that's how the regional parties will be sidelined in the process. And it will be against the political diversity, which is essential to address the social diversity of India. ठीक है? Hope you're clear with these points. Then, next point is that there will be difficult logistics in the electoral process and its management. So, when we are conducting in the same year, we are conducting for a huge country like India, okay, there will be logistical issues involved. Okay, here in day before yesterday's newspaper, it was written that Election Commission says that it needs up to a year's lead time for EVMs and VVPATs. ठीक है? So it has already notified that it needs a year's lead time to arrange the number of EVMs and VVPATs that will be required for the simultaneous elections to be held. ठीक है? Then come to the next point, that it creates unequal playing field. How? Here the national parties will be at a advantage. The more resourceful parties will be at a advantage. Okay, when there will be polling dates across the country, okay, and they will be stretching over months. Okay, so long poll schedule means it will help the extensive campaigns. It will create an unfair advantage to the more resourceful, the more richer parties. They will get more time to campaign for themselves. They will have they already have the capacity to carry on extensive campaigns, and the smaller parties in the process who have less resources will find it difficult to sustain a very long campaign. Okay, that is how it will create an unequal playing field as well. Okay, then there is a social angle involved here also, because frequent elections, they create the employment opportunities as well. So the employment opportunities when there is simultaneous polls also gets affected. ठीक है? Then we come to the way ahead. Okay, so hope I'm clear with all the uh, constraints, the challenges involved in the simultaneous polls. Then we come to the solution part. So we have two reports which should be always mentioned when the simultaneous polls questions come. Okay. One is Parliamentary Standing Committee, another is Niti Aayog Working Paper of 2017. So here the Parliamentary Standing Committee has given us a framework. Okay, it has said that we can hold the election in two phases rather than holding the election in just one phase or at one time. We can hold the elections in two phases within the span of 5 years. Okay, that is, some legislative assemblies could be held along with Lok Sabha, that is at the end of 5 years, and the remaining during the midterm of the Lok Sabha. ठीक है? Then about the schedule of the by-elections to all seats that become vacant during a year may be conducted together at one point, at one date, at one predetermined time period, which has been decided. ठीक है? The same thing is repeated by the Niti Aayog discussion paper of 2017 as well. It is also saying to conduct two-phase simultaneous election based on the recommendation of the Parliamentary Standing Committee. Okay, then it has also said about how to deal with the problem of premature or frequent elections. Okay, so in that case, when there is a premature dissolution of assembly, in the event of no confidence motion, simultaneously we can go for a confidence motion for the formation of an alternative government. Okay, so that's how we can avoid the conduction of election. Okay, that is on the lines of German constitution. The German government already has this framework of moving a confidence motion for the formation of the alternative government immediately. Okay. Then third, we can talk about the Law Commission report, which is saying that you conduct all the elections falling in a calendar year together at a predetermined time period. Okay. So these three suggestions we can always give to this particular question. Okay. Then it is, of course, the national consensus is important. When the people are ready, then the reforms has to be followed. Okay, the Prime Minister, the ex-Chief Election Commissioner Qureshi, they have said that these reforms must not be imposed on the people. First, national consensus has to be built on this issue. Okay, it should not be thrust on the people for whatsoever reasons may be. ठीक है? So that's how we have ended the discussion on this very topic. So these are the main answer sheet points one needs to keep in mind while answering this particular question. So we have discussed about the optimizing governance and development. Here we talked about the policy paralysis, the model code of conduct. Then we talked about the amendments in not less than 5 articles of the Constitution. You need to remember these very articles while answering this question. That is Article 83, 85, 172, 174 and 356. Then we also talked about the violation of the freedom of speech and expression during the process. Okay, how it was a blow to the democracy and the federalism. Okay, how the simultaneous election can lead to diminished accountability, how it can affect the social diversity. Okay, and the reports, that is Parliamentary Standing Committee on Personal Public Grievance and the Law and Justice 79th report, and the Niti Aayog working paper, that is 2017. And lastly, the national consensus. Okay, so these are the keywords you need to write in this particular paper. ठीक है, and I hope this 2017 question can be better answered after seeing this discussion. ठीक है, so thank you so much.